So welcome. Thank you for joining us again at Odyssey. We've got a real treat we have today because we're talking about energy and the home and finding the balance in ourselves and how our home where we live and how it affects us and how do we find that calm space, that quiet space, whatever. And I'm being joined today. I'm trying not to say this evening because that would mean that we are in the UK and it is this evening, but I've just gone ahead and done it. I love that. So
Yeah.
So we're being welcomed. We're being joined by Helen, Helen Ford. Would you like to
Hello.
say hello, Helen?
I would like to say hello, Helen.
I
Oh,
love it. Do you know what it reminds me of? From back in the old days, where Morecambe and Wise, when
I
they,
thought the two one is, yeah, okay.
I love it. Backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. I love it. And Helen is one of our practitioners at the Odyssey platform. Helen has got a history of, like myself, we trained as therapists, and the conventional therapy we do, and also very intuitive. But also, Helen has extra gifts and talents. So, Helen, would you like to explain what they are?
Well, my long-standing career has been interior design, which I still do alongside lots of other magical, wonderful things. And I was really lucky. My first job I think I probably said this before, but my first job in interior design was with a beautiful family-run business, and they were both practitioners of feng shui, however you choose to pronounce it. They're both very, very spiritual, very connected, very beautiful, beautiful souls, still in touch with them today. And so my initiation into interior design was not only about the practical side of the colour and the furniture and the layouts and all that, but also the energetic properties of those things and the colour and why you might not want to sit here and why you might not want to float your bed under a window and what colours mean what. And I just sponge like soaked it up. And so my career since then, it was a long time ago. I'm not even going to put it into years because it's too depressing. But my career since then has spanned sort of working in London on multi-million pound projects in the Bahamas, projects in London, where perhaps there was less of that spiritual connection, I guess, because I was working for somebody else, yada yada. But anyway, I've worked for myself now for 10 years within interior design. And so the clients I now attract back in, or the clients I attract in, are very much more of that mindset as well. So I get to help them create the homes that they want to live in and that they love, which is what it's
Oh,
all about for me.
I absolutely love that. And sometimes we don't understand or we haven't maybe thought about how what our home actually means to us. And what joy it can give to us. And I was saying to you a little bit earlier that, working with some clients where they're in toxic relationships, the energy of their toxic relationship all sort of oozes out of obviously them of what's going on emotionally and everything and into their walls. And I think you covered this, there was something also that was talking about energy recently, but I was saying also during one of the other YouTube clips about energy, how it attaches itself to the walls, almost like nicotine. And as a psychic medium, if I walk into a building, however old the building is, or anyone who's an empath or intuitive or psychic, if you
Yeah.
walk into the building and you're sense something straight away by the feel of what's going on in the building. So
Mm.
yeah, so have you felt the same way? Have you been in some places and you can sort of sense whether you like it or not, or?
Yeah, and I think another thing to note is aside from, buildings, obviously we know, the older the building, the more history, etc. But anybody that's an empath, you walk into a room and somebody's had a row in there, you can feel that. When you walk in and you're like, oh, this doesn't feel good. And the whole energy of the space has shifted because maybe there's been a huge big argument in there 5 minutes before. That's something that possibly needs clearing.
And that's the thing. This is what we're really going to cover in this session is really about looking at energy, where it can cling to, where it can hold on to, sort of how we can clear out that negative energy and how
Yeah.
we can make it more harmonized with our energy as well, and how we're feeling, sort of balancing it out. Because I was having a conversation with someone, and again, I think it's one of my YouTube things where I talk about, the first time when I realized that I was an empath or intuitive was when I walked into a charity shop or an antique shop, and then I heard all this whispering in my ears, and I was like, oh, my ears were really buzzing and really hurting. And I was like, what the hell's going on? And then when I tuned into something I picked up, it was like literally the history of that device, what I picked up, the ornament or whatever it was chattering away to me. And some people who don't know they're intuitive or empathic, walking into somewhere like that, or crowded areas, or I can't go into a shopping mall because the lights and because of the busyness of people's minds, because minds that chitter chatter about what's going on in their own life and how they're feeling is like
Mm.
it's like coming out of them, it's oozing out of them, and you can feel it a bit like what you said with the room.
Yeah, and I think that is, I think there's also, it's worth having an awareness around. A lot of it depends on where you're at any given time as well. So, for example, I just had some acupuncture today and could not, if my life depended on it, gone into a really busy space afterwards because you feel open to it. So it's worth tuning into where you're at before, when you have a reaction to a space or a room, it's like, okay, is this me or is this something that's gone on in this space? Or maybe it's a bit of both. And I've certainly had, even on a slightly bigger level, not even just about properties, but I've actually gone to like a village or somewhere and I've been like, oh, this whole vibe is just something that isn't right here, and had to literally get in the car and go somewhere else. I've been a bit like, what on earth is that? Is that me? Is that just the, and sometimes you just don't know. But yeah, it's just tuning into how you're feeling and what maybe you can do to shift that out.
It's lovely. I love what you just said because you just reminded me when I was looking for a place, I think it was about 2, 3 years ago now. And I stood there with my son. I was on the beach and I had my hands like this, like dowsing. I was like, oh, hang on, something just doesn't feel right. And he goes, what are you doing? I went, no, when I'm weighing up the energy, it just doesn't feel right. And he said, Mum, you're crazy. I went, no, think about it. Think about the people that live in the area. Think about their thoughts. There's certain types of people that will live in a certain area. If you've got the whole cluster of them coming together, I
Mm.
may not fit in with what they feel is, whatever. I might not, I might have total different ideas of how I see my life and how they see their life. And I'm not going to be judged ever again, said the
Mm.
past witch in a past life came in then. But I was like, I have to move. I can't be here. And that was really important for me. And the other thing is like being out in green space. For me, it's the trees, it's being in the fields and stuff like
Nature.
that. I have that. So yeah, in nature, and like with yourself, you live right by the sea, don't you?
Well, yes, and I think also, I mean, I moved here 2 years ago, and I was kind of looking to move, but not necessarily. And my other experiences, I have such a, because I'm so connected, to myself and my body these days, where I walk into a space and I know instantly if it's a full body no, there is no arguing with that. End of story. And I walked into the space I'm in at the moment, and I was like, oh, okay, this is not a no. And this is not a no is a good step for me because it means there's something there. I might not be a full on yes, because a lot of that would come down to comfort zone and change and all those things that our brain chatters away at us. But it's, most of us know that are empathetic, whatever, walk into a space and you know how you feel the minute you step into it.
That's the
So,
thing. That's the total thing. It's about knowing yourself better. So it's about, if you're feeling uncomfortable in certain places, then and you aren't aware that you're an empath or you're intuitive or you're psychic, start having a look at, why could you be feeling uncomfortable? It might not be the mind chit chat, it might not be what's going on in your relationship. It might be that literally you're so sensitive and you're so wide open energetically that you're actually drawing energy to you, and and it's trying to get your attention. I had this with somebody not so long ago. Went to a pub with them, and a lovely little country pub, and we're sitting there having a drink, and suddenly started whistling. I'm like, you don't normally whistle that tune. What are you whistling? And they went, am I whistling? I went, yeah. And then he started humming, and I was like, oh, sound like an old sea shanty. And this pub's like 1500 or something or other. And I'm like, okay, I think it's time for us to leave now, because he left himself very open. He had been drinking a little bit, and then your energy, the boundaries are quite wide open once you've been using, anything, substance or alcohol, whatever it is, very open. And I said, let's just leave, and we'll just leave them here. We're going to walk out the door. And as we walked out the door, I said, you can stay here. So the spirit, you can stay here, and we're going now. And they had just literally walked in, and they just sort of sat nicely within him because he was quite open and whatever. So, when people aren't aware that they, are very sensitive, we can invite all sorts of things, and we're going to be looking at that as well.
definitely. Yeah, and yeah, definitely. I've definitely had an experience of that recently with shenanigans going on in my dressing room for sure. And being aware of that and being a bit like, I think there's definitely some games. I say dressing room. It is a small cupboard off my bedroom. It's like nothing big and grandiose. But yeah, I've definitely had a feeling of something going on in there that's like a bit pixie-like and a bit naughty and a bit cheeky, and me going, this isn't ideal when I'm trying to sleep, and I know that there's a party going on in there. So
And this
yeah,
is the thing, this is what we're going to look at as well, that things that go bump in the night, because that's
right.
really important. And I love the fact you call it a dressing room. Now, I've been to your place and I would still call it a dressing room. It doesn't have to be like, it has to be huge, but that's a dressing room to me, okay?
It's
It's a
important for you to
dressing
walk
room.
into.
I love that. But this is the thing that like our energy of us as individuals also and what we can attract in as well. Now, if I look at going back when I was a teenager, there was an episode in my life I was really unhappy, going for a lot of trouble, what was going on in the family. And where we had moved to, my mum had sort of run away from my stepdad, and there was a lot of violence going on. So we were sort of rehoused in social housing, and it was a flat. And we lived there for a while, and we noticed that the animals were freaking out all around us. And we had literally pictures that were flying off the wall, and no lie, it was just amazing. I remember sitting on the sofa, instead of the picture dropping down if a nail sort of goes or the screw, the picture actually flew off the wall, ended up on the floor in front of my feet, and
Wow.
no glass had been broken at all. It was just absolutely crazy. And then we could hear chains, and then you could hear dripping across the ceiling and everything like that. So we had poltergeists basically, and I'd witnessed a few things. I'd seen something. So we had poltergeists also in the flat. And so we lived in that environment, which was so uncomfortable, so unbearable. But it was because of the energy of, I was really not happy in myself. There was a lot of negative energy going on. Mum had run away from my stepdad, but then he was re-invited back into the flat. So it was still continuously going on, quite violent, alcoholic, whatever. And because we were teenagers, my sister and I, that the energy of how we were feeling, it sort of attracted that energy into
Mm,
the flat, you see. So, and at that time, didn't know about sage, didn't know anything about that. But I
mm.
had this intuitive feeling I needed to get some crystals, and that's when I started collecting my crystals. That was really fun.
Oh, okay, wow. As you would as I guess a youngster without really knowing any different. It's just an intuitive pull that you don't question at that age, right? It's just like this is what I need to do. Of course I do. We don't get in our mind and start questioning whether we're right or wrong.
That's right. And it's funny working with the intuitive side of us. And it's interesting because I call you the crystal queen because we know that you do stuff with crystals as well.
Yeah, but yeah.
Um, and we need to look at that as well, looking at if we want to change the vibe of an area around us, and making a differences and stuff like that. I mean, there's a number of things that we can cover here, but
Mm,
from going into buildings and picking up things, as a medium, sometimes I'm called to go into like facilities, or if there's some sort of cases that I'm working on to feel the echo of the fingerprint of the energy in the area, I do that. And then from literally, saying to somebody, well, my guides are saying that you've got a mirror at the end of your bed by your feet. Why would you do that? It's like a portal. It's like, what
right.
are you biting in? Right. So from your point
Yeah.
of view, the interior designer and everything in the energy that can you see how wrong that is?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if I'd use the word wrong because ultimately we do these things for whatever, without perhaps realizing why we're doing them or what we need. And so a lot of people intuitively wouldn't realize. So for me, one of my big things in terms of bedroom is I could never sleep with a picture above my head on the wall. Just for me, I'm just like, why would anybody do that? But other people would comfortably do that and not even think. So it all comes back down to intuition. But yeah, I mean, there's an argument that you shouldn't have any mirrors in the bedroom because they just disrupt your sleep, basically. But I don't believe in shoulds and shouldn't. So it's like just rolling with that intuitive side and seeing what feels right.
See, you're good. You're just very polite. I would just say there ain't any way that you should have a mirror at the end of your bed. Just don't do it because you're inviting God knows what into that. It's
Mm,
like because the thing is when you go to sleep, it's like your soul can move in and out as in different dimensions. So if you've got like a porthole at the end of your bed, energy sucking you in, I mean, it depends on people's beliefs and stuff, but you're losing energy in that. It's sort of like where your energy is flowing. And this was where also, we're talking about, where does that energy go as well? Well, we can lose it. So there's things like the obvious things, you've got ornaments and they belong to somebody else. And I know
Mm.
you mentioned this recently, they belong to somebody and you've got this antique or something that belongs to a great art. Why the hell are you keeping it if you don't like it? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I suppose because of the beginning of my career when I was 21, I became quite a ruthless clutter clearer from the beginning because, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like I do it every minute, but every now and then I'll do this big burst and everything gets thrown out. Won't be tidy anyone that stands near me. Um, but I'm also I've always been a very big, I give a lot of consideration to what is surrounding me, and whether or not it's by my choice or because I'm feeling some sort of sense of obligation to keep it, which again I don't think is particularly healthy. But
No, because you're right. You're so right. Because if you're keeping something you're keeping it because you think you have to, there also can be the feelings and emotions around that item. So if there's somebody that you're not happy with, you don't like them, it's a bit like, okay, so if I think of a past relationship I have, if I've got jewelry that's connected to that past relationship, it's I ain't keeping it because there's energy around that pieces of item of jewelry or clothing that was
yeah,
purchased at a particular time by that individual coming in. And I mentioned this the other day on Instagram. It was a bit like with the wardrobe. Go into the wardrobe, look at the wardrobe, what doesn't belong to you, or what doesn't suit you anymore, or what doesn't feel you. Try the items on. If it doesn't make you feel $1 million, and
right.
it's not just physically, it's about how emotionally it makes you feel. If you feel that,
Mhm.
say for instance, I mean, if you feel like I'm too fat, too thin, don't feel like this, it's not bringing out the best in myself. Why would you keep it? You remove it because it's
No.
one, it's holding up space and it's holding up the energy of when you bought it, what was going on for you at that particular time, how you saw yourself. So I love what you do with the space clearing and getting everything out physically, because that's what we should do constantly because we're changing.
Well, and otherwise, especially if we're holding on to great Aunt Maud's, I don't know, whatever, China tea set or something as an example, it's just stagnating in a cupboard. And so there's no energy flow around that space because you've just got this lump of something sat there, or it's sat on your coffee table or whatever, wherever it is. And actually, interestingly, although I consider myself to be relatively clutter free, clutter as in, just crap around for the sake of it. I do have a lot of books and I have a lot of crystals and don't consider them clutter. But I went away at Christmas and stayed in a very sunny, very minimalist apartment because it was, an Airbnb. And literally nothing. You've got a table, you've got a bed, you've got a sofa, and that's it. And it wasn't until I got home and I thought, God, what is going on? Something feels really just uncomfortable. And I just couldn't pinpoint what it was. And I realized it was because I'd come back to a space with a lot of stuff in it. I've got plants, I've got crystals, I've got books. And I'd been in a space for 10 days where there was not a lot. So you can really feel the difference when you clear and clear and clear, or when you step out of your space into a different space and how that feels.
I love that. I feel sorry for Aunt Maud, whoever she is, but
I
I
don't
can
know
see
what
it
that is.
turning in her grave now. I'm sorry. Not that you're in your grave still, but you know how it works. I know. I'm just trying to be funny. Um, but I love that when you step away from your environment and you come back in, a lot of the
Oh,
times we're on holiday or we move away from the environment and we come back in, we can sort of feel that. And I think
fresh
that's
eyes.
really, yeah. And I think it's really important for people to really sort of connect this, that hopefully you're going through changes, and hopefully I know there's stuff that's going on the planet, there always is, and there's always stuff going on in our own lives, but actually that's quite good to see it as there's things going on in our lives because it's shifting and changing things out the way. I
Mm.
always will say this, it's like if the caterpillar had senses and could feel and had nerve endings, there's no way a caterpillar is going to say, I'm going into that chrysalis or that cocoon and I'm going to change and I'm going to grow my wings, because it's going to be too painful.
Mm.
So because the caterpillar is a fact, it has no nerve endings. So you can go in there, be like pea soup, and then it changes and develops all its wings and everything else. And
Mm.
so it will get on with it. But with humans, when we're going through difficult times and pains, we tend to say, oh, I don't want to go through this, it's too difficult, I can't manage. Well, actually, if we say God, the divine, the universe, or whatever you want to call it, didn't think you could be going through that and you weren't going to survive it, you wouldn't be going for it in the first place. So
Yeah.
let me tell you, you're going for it for a reason, is to shift everything. So the other thing they were sort of saying, so you said, somebody went, when you said plants and crystals, they went, we want plants and crystals. You said about your own place and
No,
you.
of course we do. Absolutely. No, and I'm really aware of that, 100%. But I think it was just me making, I had the contrast between, and when I first arrived in the place I was staying over Christmas, I was like, oh God, it's like, very typical, very sparse. But you adapt, of course, because we're humans and that's what we do. So you adapt to this sort of sunny space with not much in it. And then when I got home, it was like, oh my God, there's so much stuff in this space. But it's not, like I say, it's not junk, it's not clutter. And yeah, I choose to have a home full of crystals and plants, and I wouldn't have it any other way because they just do so much for the energy. But I think it was just me adapting back into my space and going, you know what, actually, maybe I do need to thin out the books and maybe I do need to just tidy up a little bit. That
And it's
side.
funny. It's funny you're mentioning about books because I said about recently I picked up the book The Honeymoon Effect by Dr. Bruce Lipton again after a long period of time. Now this is again connected to the home because it's really funny. My bookshelf, I hadn't changed any books on it. And I moved from my old relationship into this new apartment I'm living in, and I've got my bookshelves. I wish that would be ideal.
Brilliant.
Bookshop. Can you imagine? That would be my ideal heaven. I really would love that. I'm such a bookworm. And I sat there one evening, and I could see that all my books were there, but this book jumped out at me, and I'm in a new relationship. And I was like, okay, let's go through this book again. And going through the book again, it's
Mm,
funny. I started looking at because I've got a habit of underlining things. I love to underline sentences that jump out at me and write little notes on the side. When I read through the book, I could see that what I had wrote before 10 years ago when I was in the relationship and I couldn't
mm.
understand it. And then now in the new relationship, I'm receiving so much more from this relationship, it's so much more nourishing. I was like looking at the book going, oh my God, I'm reading it in such a different way. So
Yeah.
I love it. So sometimes picking up those books that you've had that you were passionate about buying in the first place,
Mm.
not cookery books, so I don't do cookery books. I don't do. In my oven, my daughter said to me when I first moved in, she goes, Mum, should we cook? So I went, what? What do you mean? She goes, what? And so she pulled down the oven door. She goes, Mum, there's a cookery book in the oven. And that's where it's staying because I don't do cookery. I just don't. I'll boil an egg. I'll have something like that, but I'm not cooking. There's no way. If you've had a family for 32 years and then
Yeah.
you stop, I'm not cooking for myself, as in a roast dinner and something you put in the oven. So, yeah,
I
anyway.
think that's the Carrie Bradshaw line, doesn't she say something like she stores her shoes in her oven or something, extra shoe storage or something like that. But yeah,
Hey, darling, there's not enough space to store my shoes in the oven, that's for sure. And the only
clearly you
reason
need to throw some out.
you actually come to say I actually did recently. So look, if I think of this from the therapist in me as well, so oh gosh, where do I start? When I was a child, we had an episode where we didn't have any money, and literally we had one pair of shoes, and I remember wearing them to school, and they had holes in the sole, and I used to have to put cereal packet. The box in the sole so I could walk on them. And I remember it always getting wet when it rained. Anyway, so coming from that background, not the whole of my childhood, parts of my childhood when we was really poor. And so it made me appreciate when I did have money to buy shoes. What did I end up doing? I became a manager of a shoe shop in London. I ended up buying these
Brilliant.
really fancy shoes. And I mean, I was lucky I got a big discount. And so then I had shoes and bags to match. And I did wear them, but for me, it was like stepping into those shoes. It was like, Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz, it was like, oh, I've made it. I'm there now. So shoes are always a sensitive part. But like you just said, Helen, I did last week. I'm moving and my cupboard, I went into my cupboard and I looked and I went, that's not me anymore. I need to take them out. That's the old me. So you're
Mm.
right. You're so right, Helen, about the shoes and everything else. I love that.
But I think it's that I think I was saying this in my other event that we we accumulate a lot of stuff, but because we're evolving so fast as humans, like you say, you pick up that book that 10 years ago you loved,
Yeah.
and now you perhaps look at it and you read it and you're reading it with totally different eyes.
Yeah.
In my case, I don't think books last 10 years on my shelf as an example, but I do think that, you know, there will always be those objects that we think, oh, do you know what, I think I might come back to that at some point. We have to really check that within our body, as opposed to keeping it, you know, just in case. It's like, am I really going to refer back to this? And I do have a hard rule with paperbacks, as in read a cheesy novel, you know, read your cheesy novels on holiday, pass them on, pass them on. But I have shelves and shelves and shelves of both interior design books, which are all very much coffee table books, and a whole bunch of like educational, self-help, whatever you want to call it, books, which never really get thrown out, to be honest.
Do you know what I love? Because you just remind me what I did. So like I hopefully I'm moving and I've been here 2 years and it's like, well, if I haven't used it by now,
Mm,
not coming with me. It
yeah.
came from the old house because I had memories that I thought I needed at the time, and I did, and they comforted me. So they're
Mm,
staying in the cupboards, and I was like, "Oh!" But then actually, they caused me more drama than anything else because I'd
mhm,
look at them and go, oh, "That was belonged to my big house that I used to have, and my family, and the
mm,
cars and everything else." And so I didn't really need it. But what it
mhm.
does remind me of, like last summer when I was here, every time I read a book, my goal was to read a book a week, one book a week. That's all I wanted to do. But that's not easy. It's quite hard. There's so much going on in your
There's a
life.
lot, yeah.
I read one book a week. Then what I used to do is I wrote a little notelet inside, a sticky note, put it in, and then I said, "Please take. You are welcome." So what I did is put it inside the book, and my book had. I mean, they know it's me because I scribble in my books. That's just like I point out notes and stuff. And I thought, well, no, it's quite useful because then they get to know who was the person that read the book and how their brain thought. That was my theory. And I'd leave them on the benches. So if you went to Kew
Oh, nice.
Garden last year and you found a book or anywhere in that area, it was my book that I passed on, and you are most welcome. Because I love passing on books. So if you picked up a book and you thought, who could this belong to? It may be mine.
Well, I love that idea. I'm probably be less fond of picking up a book that had a ton of notes scribbled all over it personally, but you know, what do I know? But I think the interesting point that you made there actually was as well, we have this sort of I know my mum definitely has this. She wouldn't mind saying. We have this thing as humans that we kind of have to hold on to physical stuff to remember stuff. And actually, we all know how that feels when we pick up an old diary and we open it, as an example, and we open it. And the minute you read the words, could have been 2 years ago, could have been 10 years ago, we're transported back to that space energetically, and we can feel that within our body. And so it really does beg the question of, is it serving me to be reminding myself of this stuff? And that's not to say that all memories are bad memories, because you have your memories in your heart, the ones that really are the important ones, the ones that feel good. But do we always need these things around us that make us go, but, you know, do we want to be in that energy? Not really. We want to be in that new energy of today and that energy of tomorrow, not the whole like, oh, but this was, and oh, but this was, because that's been and gone. That's those lessons, right? It's a fine
Do you know
line.
No, I totally agree with you, but I wish I was strong enough. I'm going to totally admit, leaving the last relationship of 32 years and having baby photographs and videos and stuff, and I found it very hard that I don't have the videos. I just have the photographs, and I look at the photographs, and it keeps taking me, just as you're saying. I mean, it's newly fresh, but
Mm,
keeps taking me back to that situation. But what I have been doing, because I noticed it, because I thought it's taken me back to some of the feelings that I remembered about myself, how I felt. In a
mm,
way, it was a good reminder now to look back at the photograph and say, my God, Anne, you were so unhappy and you didn't have the strength, the courage, the confidence to leave that toxic relationship. Now, look, I hold my hands up because, if I think about it, I'm just as responsible in that relationship as the other person. So I'm not blaming this other person totally
mm,
at all. My younger self, when I met this person where I was at, when I look back now, we both were actually not good for each other at all. But you get into that routine and that habit of creating the family life, creating the children, having the cars, living that sort of life. And you think that's the perfect life for you. Because
cool.
sometimes you can get caught up in it. So I think
Right.
sometimes when you're going through changes, it's good to sort of like stop and breathe in. I mean, I've sat many a time, I totally have hands up to this, where I've sat on my floor in my front room on my soft squidgy carpet, all the fluff because I'm very tactile. Soft squidgy carpet, had my lovely cushion. I was holding on to it and had my fluffy blanket around me. And I sat there and I wept, but I needed to do it. I needed to
Mm,
let go of everything that was holding me stuck. So,
mm,
that is I was going to say a lovely exercise to try, but it's a great way in a way of letting go of things, as in if you need to say goodbye to something, or goodbye to part of myself, that who I was back then, because I know that I've changed. That was the relationship. And thankfully I'm in a happy, loving relationship now, and I can see the difference. But that
mm.
19-year-old self, I'm 55 now, going on 56 this year. Um, I'm still roller skating though.
Oh no, 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 no more injuries, please. No.
I just have to rest up. Last July I broke both wrists and damaged my neck and shoulder, whatever. But anyway, I'm still here surviving. They're not gonna take me yet. But sometimes it's great to sit there and just to let go of things. So sometimes it's a good exercise as well, as in when you're processing and you're removing items, you're letting go of them, saying this no longer serves you. It's actually quite good for you from a psychological point of view, because you're saying goodbye to something that no longer serves you, like you said,
Yeah.
but you can sort of go through it and sort of like, I sort of said, well, I wish them well. I send them love. I wish
Mm.
them well energetically to that person.
Yeah,
So,
I have Louise Hay was famous for what I just love one of her quotes, which is "I bless you with love and I release you."
oh, I love
And
that.
it's so gentle and simple, but I think yeah, I mean, it's cathartic to go through that process. It's not an energy we want to be in for any long period of time, but we all know those times when we've had big shifts and we have to almost say thank you and goodbye. I bless you with love and I release you, and it's there is a "you are free and I'm free" at the end of that as well, which is also gorgeous. So yeah, I think it's a releasing of the energetic attachment to it, isn't it? And almost sending the past you the love that you need to be able to let it
Yes.
go.
And that's it. It's like that, as we know, as therapists, is that domino effect that we would
Mm,
use maybe in a timeline or something that we would do. But it's that domino effect going back. And this is important. We're talking about the home, the energy environments and stuff, but you can see from the items you have around you actually are so energetically connected to you. And also your life journey, your life, moving through the progression and the chapters of your life. I had a
mm,
client, well, a few clients that have now, clients who aren't happy with their body self-image. And I was saying to, and this is something that we can all try. And I do it regularly now, actually, and it's helped a hell of a lot. Where, we're talking about mirrors before, but it's like in front of the mirror, you stand there fully unclothed.
mm.
I know everyone's in shock now who's listening to this. You're naked, basically. And
Thank
uh,
you, yeah, that's the
yep,
thing.
you got it. And I remember the first time I did it, and I was like, I'm not happy with this. I've got, I'm a woman that breastfed. I totally admit. I mean, my children now are screaming and saying, "Mum, why are you telling the world?" But I'm just trying to. I'm like every other woman out there, you know. So yeah, the woman that breastfed, and a little bit extra, more. As I was told by my new partner, there's more to cuddle. That's all, Anne. It doesn't matter. There's more to cuddle, and I like that. I'm like, okay, fine, it's good. I like that too. But stand in front of the mirror and like saying that you like yourself, because it'll be the most difficult thing ever. And as I said to a couple of clients, anything I'm telling my clients, I've done it myself. So I
Yeah.
said, stand in front of the mirror and you go, what is it you like about yourself?
Mm.
And I remember it was difficult. And the first time I was like, I don't like anything but myself. I want to turn away and I want to walk away from the mirror. And all I heard, I mean, it helps being a psychic medium, right? But if you're intuitive and you're working with your own energy, and hopefully you're doing the work with your guides, my grandma came in and she said, Anne, you have my blue eyes. You loved me.
Oh.
You have my blue eyes. And I went, Nan, thanks. So I wrote on a post-it note, blue eyes, Nan's blue eyes. I found it difficult at first to say I love my blue eyes, but I put love my Nan's blue eyes. I could see that genetically I had her eyes. So I posted it on the mirror, full length mirror. Okay.
Mm.
So this went on for weeks, going through different body parts and all these stickers and everything. You looked, you could just about see me in the mirror because it was like covered all these sticky notes. But it helps. So every day when I stood in front of myself, I started helping myself, because what happens is a lot of my clients that I find that they have an issue with weight or whatever it is, or maybe they're not eating or whatever's going on for them, that they started liking their body parts, understanding that what made them who they are today is actually
Mm,
having someone ancestrally linked to you, bloodline, as a relative or whatever, that came through, and like you got those sort of characteristics and parts of their body and everything else.
mm,
And then their weight started naturally moving away because they wasn't holding on for protection mode. They started falling in love with themselves. And it's just simply from a mirror.
mm.
A mirror.
Right. But not a mirror at the end of the bed.
No, don't put a mirror at the end of it. There's no way that's happening. You know, I mean, you're foolish. If you start telling me, someone emails me and says, I'm having nightmares, I'm like, where's your mirror?
Right.
So if your mirror's at the end of the bed, expect those nightmares. And you were saying about the picture above the head. I mean, that's just common sense, right? Because you don't want to be knocked on the head in the middle of the night just in case it falls down.
Well, you say it's just common sense, but actually, you'd be amazed. I mean, I have to say, over the years, I mean, some things that I think are real common sense, other people just make sense, and I can't make sense of that, and that's fine. That's their journey. But the other thing I was talking about the other week was, people that have like beds under windows and things like that. Energetically, I'm like, you are lit well, we know what happens in our dream state. Everything's coming out of your crown and it's whipping straight out the window. And that's, the least of your worries. You'll be bloody freezing in the winter. But yeah, and so I've gone into people's spaces before. Do you literally sleep like that? And they're like, yeah. The interesting thing is I've seen that quite a lot with uh, sort of young children. So, friends of mine that have got kids that have maybe said, oh, my daughter's not sleeping or my son's not sleeping. And I'm like, oh, okay, let me see the bedroom. And then, we've literally got a bed under the window. And I'm like, well, they're not supported. Of course they're not sleeping. There's no comfort there. There's no security there on an energetic level,
Well,
right?
you're so spot on, because we know like children have a lot of dreams where they're flying as well in them, and some adults do, or some adults might remember when they were childlike and as in their childhood state that they remember flying. Some still do get those flying dreams, but this is what this is all about. I remember it very well. And where was my bed? It was under the window. You just reminded me. Oh, hello. No wonder I used to walk in my sleep. I mean, come on.
But that's the thing, though. But you just said earlier, like it's common sense, but it's not necessarily common sense for everybody.
I'm
What
blaming my
one
mother.
person's
No.
version of common sense.
I'm blaming my mother. I was too young
Right.
to leave my bed. Bless
Yeah,
her.
that's the same thing, but it was her version of common sense. She didn't even
Yeah.
think about it. She's like, that's where the bed goes, and that's it. And yeah, I mean, I tend to feel into a room, so I kind of know where things should go. But a lot of people they don't. It's just like, well, that's where it goes, and that's the only place it fits.
And that what's interesting, we're talking about the bed and the bedroom, and we're talking about dreaming and stuff like that. Lots what's been coming up that I've been hearing in the emails is people but saying to me that, in their dream state, some people are feeling that different energies in their rooms, or somebody, they're getting nightmares, or like the bogeyman at the end of the bed. Now, I told a story a couple of weeks ago about how I had a stalker. I was in bed fast asleep, and I think it was about 3:33, and suddenly I literally woke up, and it was like an emergency, like alarms going off almost, but there was no physical alarms, and I felt there was someone standing at the bottom of my bed. Well, when I actually sat up, there was this figure at the end of my bed. It wasn't physically there, but it was the stalker that I've had. And then I got a text message from the person that I'm seeing. He said, "Are you okay?" And I went, "There's someone in my room." And he went, "What, physically or energetically?" Thank God he understands me. I mean, the poor.
Yes, yeah.
And then I said, energetically, he goes, "I'll be in there, I'll remove him right now." So he did his bit at his end and he removed them. But this can actually happen if someone is thinking of you, like, relationships that people coming out of. I had someone today that the way they had ended their relationship, the person that they've moved countries away from hasn't quite stopped thinking about this individual. So energetically, there's this energetic cord attached to this individual in this country. And I said, you need to cut the ties with that. And I said, I want you to place yourself. I mean, I do this every night now, that, I have a very large piece of amethyst cave, physically. But what I do is energetically, I place myself in a giant crystal cave, amethyst, which
Mm.
helps me sleep, and no one comes in. And I work with guides and gatekeepers, and my gatekeeper, he's on the doorman, no one's allowed to come in. And since that, I sleep right through the night. I'm not interrupted at all. you know, the other night I was interrupted, but I forgot to put, you know, put my cave in. But yeah, so if anyone's having trouble and you're not sleeping, that might be to put your crystals in. And Helen, you know about crystals as in negative energy and stuff like that. I mean, what would you recommend people are having issues with negative energy or in the room or
Well,
where's
I mean, I've definitely had that experience since I've been in my current place with the wardrobe. I can't say more than that. It's literally Narnia goes on in there. I shut the door now and I don't know what's going on in there. But and I've certainly worked. I mean, I have a lot of crystals in my room anyway, but I at times when I've had quite, because I'm also a real dreamer and traveler and God knows what goes on at night. I'm very busy. I bought a weighted blanket once, thinking that actually having a weighted blanket on me might ground me and might make me just not dream as mad. But it was like literally being in a straight jacket, and it gave me such bad anxiety. I had to get rid of it straight away. Like literally was like no.
I think there's a past life. Just
Right. Yeah. All right. Shush. Oh God. Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I hadn't thought of that.
oh, see the reaction you just had.
I know,
Oh,
I know, I know. Thanks for reminding me of my past lives. We've had a few. But so one of the things I have done in the past, and I don't know actually if I've got it at the current situation, I've got my dressing area, I've got it crystal gridded with primarily black stones like tourmaline or obsidian or whatever, because they are the protection stones. And I've actually done that around the four corners of my bed in the past. And I think that, you know, one of the, I'd say if you are going to do that, if you are having like quite crazy night's sleep, is a lot of it is about anything energetic is about the intention you put behind it, right? So if you're holding on to your crystals with the intention of creating a protective space around you in your bed, then make sure your crystals know that, whether you hold them to your heart, just have a little chat to them. And yeah, and do that. And then just be aware when you're hoovering next.
oh, as somebody we know that used to stick crystals in their bib. Hang on, was that you that in their bra? Sorry.
Oh, well, bra, but also under my pillow quite a lot. Often I had set with crystals under my pillow, and then, of course, you know, busy times, my cleaners come in, and I'm like, oh shit, where's my crystal gone? And then I'm like in the laundry bin or through the washing machine, and I mean, it's really annoying this practical thing that we have to do in life, isn't it? But yeah, so just be warned.
What do you mean clean the house? The practical thing, clean the house.
Yes, because they disrupt my crystals.
Right, okay, how dare they? How dare they? And
That's
that's the thing with the astral traveling that we do. You know, I was talking to my guys the other night because I didn't put myself in a crystal cave and they woke me up and I had a brilliant idea. Oh, actually about a feminine, masculine, divine energy sort of workshop that I'm going to be doing online and in person with Helen. And they came through in the channel and I said, why have you decided to wake me up at this time of morning just to tell me? And they went, because you're too busy during the day and the only time that you're not doing any work is in your sleep. And they're like, thank you very much. So I will need to allocate time. Do I know Helen's just frowning at me right now? And I'm like, I know, Helen. I know. I need to stop. Slow down, Anne, because I need to channel this information. But the thing is, when we are, like you said, with the intention, when we set it with the crystals, it's very much about, you know, when we're going to bed, that we're saying that we want to sleep. We don't want to be interrupted. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was interrupted by some lovely woman that had been murdered 39 years ago. And she came in to tell me that, can I please help her? And I'm like, oh, well, what the hell? Can you book a proper time?
well, the veil is thin, isn't it, at that time? So that's, and
Yes.
I have to say, because I am also such an avid dreamer and I'm very busy at night, I often, depending on how frazzled I am, but I will often literally just call in and just like, right, I literally set my intention for sleep. Tonight, I'm going to have a quiet night. And I do what I did say the other week. I do a little turn down service. You know, I'll go and I'll put lavender oil in my diffuser for an hour before I go to bed, clear the space, as in literally tidy away any crap that's around. And then when I go to bed, it's like I've now started doing what you suggested, the crystal cave, calling the gatekeeper, and literally just set the intention for a good night's sleep. And you know, if things are really nuts, calling Archangel Michael. I mean, we've
I,
got it all going on over here.
I love it. The thing that I do, my turning down service is to put my electric blanket on. I get my pajamas on, get my slippers ready, and then put my light on, and then my books by my side, and I go in, and then I'll put myself in my crystal cave. But yeah, it's always
Yeah,
my blanket because it's cold, and it gives me that comfort. When you're sleeping on your own, you need that extra comfort, right?
right.
But
Yeah, yeah.
even like the squidgy blankets, though, like the hug in the rug. Well, thank you very much. You've now decided to join us. Hug in the rug, as in the blanket. You know, when we need to take that time when we want to soothe ourselves, look after ourselves. We're having one of those days. I'm looking forward to switching off on Saturday this week, as in just sitting on my sofa in my PJs, which is unheard of, sitting in front of watching a TV with the black and white old movies of Lauren Hardy. That's all I want to do. Or the old Hitchcock movies or whatever it is. And I'm going to put my electric, I've got also electric. Oh, you've got one as well. The
Yeah.
blankets that you have during the day and wrap it around me. And that's all I want to
Heated
do.
throw,
Yeah, just a throw.
revolutionary.
That's all I want to do. And so
Yeah.
it's knowing what we want to do when we take our time out. How do we nourish ourselves? How
Mm,
can our home, there's also about the ritual of meditation and where we have our meditation. A lot of people tend to lay down and go to sleep. Well, actually, the meditation is a form of being with the meditation. So
hmm
do the hypnosis meditation, and yes, as I create them for some clients, and they say they fall asleep. It's not really asleep. It's like literally it's bringing them back on the brain wavelength, whatever. But
mm,
if I sit here every day, which I do sit here every day, I meditate. So I know when I come into this room, this is my meditation state. This is my meditating chair. So
mm.
having the rituals like where you're going to meditate, because then your body's like muscle memory.
Anchor. Yeah, it's an anchor, isn't it? I actually have, oh, crikey, sorry. I actually have two. I actually set up a little altar space in my bedroom where I do sit and meditate or chant or whatever I'm doing this week. And listen, I don't do the same thing every day because I think well, for me personally, I just have to mix it up. But I also have a really beautiful space, which is literally where I sit most evenings, which is my sofa. But I make sure, especially if I'm doing things in the morning, that I still honor that space as a bit of a sacred space, and I light a candle and set an intention and do all those things. Listen, the altar is where we are, right? We just,
Yeah, yeah.
create it.
I love that. I mean, my altar sometimes in my bathroom, in my bath, because I've got my
Right.
crystals and my candles, and I'm there, and I'm like with the salt minerals, and it's
Mm,
like salt baths, just detox to get rid of any toxins I pick up during the day.
yeah.
Working with different entities all day long. Sometimes they hang on to you, and that's another thing. If you're out and about and you feel that your mood has changed, or you feel heavy or drained emotionally because certain people, I mean, there's loads of different terminologies for that, but coming back to your home and
Mm,
like being able to detox in your home, and
mm,
bath is one thing for me. I know some people will like have the showers and they visualize the white light going through their body, whatever it is, or
mm,
feet in a bowl with some salt minerals, that will help. If you're going back, and I know because I can hear this, someone sort of said this to me, if you're going back and it doesn't feel like home because you might be in a toxic relationship or something, it's not how you want it to be, or you're not living in your permanent home, or there's something going on, then find what you can find for yourself, wherever that is, whether it
within
is.
that space.
Yeah, yeah. Even, I had a park bench that used to be my favorite space. I wasn't unhappy, so I'd go to a park bench. So
Yeah.
that's where I'd go to find my space. So wherever it is, that home, yes, it wasn't a physical building, but it was where my heart was. My heart felt at home when I sat on the bench looking at nature. So it's about finding your space wherever that is.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else you want to mention now before we open up to the questions, Helen, at all?
Not specifically. No, I think we were just flying with it and seeing what came
Yeah.
up.
So I think we're now going to open up to the audience that we have in front of us, and we're going to answer as many questions as we can.